local news from WSG.
Oh, no. This is U-Turn Laverne, and we are going to go ahead and we're having a little bit of a camera frozen problem. I don't know if you've... This is 1100 WSGI. How you doing, y'all? This is one street over. Let me properly say hello. We have, as you know, we're, all kinds of bells and whistles in here, and we have this app. It's the WSGI app, and we have a YouTube link that goes with that, and that we play the show over. And the camera's frozen on that side. Now, the one on our normal social media page, I believe, is working okay, and we're there. You can see Ray Render sitting here with me, but we've been trying to fix all that. And you may have even seen Hannah Sadler come walking in here just a minute ago in her apron. We had her on deck, waiting to see. When we schedule Congressman John Rose, we never know if he's going to be able to talk with us for an hour or a half hour. So we always kind of have the farmers market on standby, and I talked to Hannah, and we just never really finalized things, and so we didn't connect. But I've got her rescheduled, not this Thursday, but next Thursday morning at 7 to come in and talk about the farmers market. She's the president of the farmers market now. We're going to be starting that up before we blink, and she's also Grain and Honey. I mean, just a great bakery. They have so good stuff. I experienced one of their sourdough cinnamon rolls for the first time, and oh my word, they're fabulous. But she has got such good stuff going on over there, and we're going to have a proper visit with her next Thursday morning, since we're able to get the congressman for the full hour. And so I'll tell Ray to go ahead and get the congressman to give us a call. John Rose, we were kind of hoping he was going to be in town today, because what happened, we have the big dinner for the Open Door Pregnancy and Resource Center that is happening tonight up at Ruby Cora, I think is the name of the venue. But so we have that going tonight, and John had it on his schedule really until like last week, that he was planning on being a part of that, and at the last minute, Miss Pelosi decided that she wanted to have them in session. So, and here is John right now. I think we're going to be able to get him on the air. And John, are you with me? Are you with me, John?
I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you for kind of standing by with us. Hannah did show up, but she very graciously said that she would come back next Thursday. So that way we can have a little bit more time with you this morning. And too, I'm so sorry you can't join us tonight for the Open Door Pregnancy and Resource Center fundraiser. I know Ray's going to be there in your stead, but apparently Ms. Pelosi decided y'all needed to be back in Washington today.
That's right. Well, Laverne, thank you, and thank you to WSGI for making this program possible. I appreciate the chance to represent the people of the 6th District, so it's a pleasure to join you this morning. But you're right, Speaker Pelosi has changed the schedule for this week, I think now 7 times, including late last week. So unfortunately, I won't get to join you tonight in Adams.
Well, but again, Ray is always a great representative for you, and I do appreciate that you were able to join us on Saturday for our reorganizational meeting that we had with the Republican Party, and we have a new chairman there. Arlen Smith is our new chairman. I am stepping down from that role and had a wonderful time, but it's time for somebody else to kind of take the helm on that. But we had a great visit with you. Did you talk to a lot of great folks on Saturday?
Yes, it's always enjoyable to get to share time with strong Republicans and folks who are coming out in the community to get involved in the political process. You hear me say this often. The founding fathers told us that vigilance is the price of freedom, eternal vigilance and liberty. And so, seeing those great patriots out on Saturday protecting and standing up for our freedoms and liberties is very heartwarming and encouraging.
Well, and we talked for a minute on Saturday about what we wanted to talk about today. Now, I told you, I said at the very first, I pursed it. I said, you've got to fill us in on what's going on with Chelsea. Y'all got a baby on the way, another bouncing baby boy. And I love the fact that Guy's going to be about 3.5. And I told you, I said, now just remember, when my third one, I had 2 3.5-year-olds when my third son was born. So just remember, think about having 2 guys, and you'll understand what I was going through. But how are things going? How's your bride doing?
Well, thank you for asking. She is doing well, and all the reports have been very positive. So we feel like we're blessed and in as good a place as you can be. Obviously, you have things that you worry about at these points, but all the reports from her doctors have been very positive, and we're about 2 or 3 weeks out, and all looks well.
That's great news, and I know you are getting excited. We were talking about how that Guy's big concern is he thinks he's going to have a playmate right out of the gate, right? That's going to have to kind of settle that confusion a little bit. So, well, very, very good. Well, okay, now on Saturday, and just give Chelsea our love and our best and know that we are praying, and I know everything's going to be wonderful. But with all that said, what would you say is the number one question that you're getting? I had sent you some things that people have been inquiring about, but what would you say is the number one concern that people are giving you when it comes to what's happening in regards to things in Washington? What's the number one thing that you're getting a question on?
Gosh, that's hard to say, but certainly the executive orders is at the top of the list. I think just the people are concerned about the very quick reversal of the policies that were in place during the previous administration that had led really to the best economy in our lifetimes, and so they see lots of early signs that cause them concern. Rising fuel prices as one example, but I think people are also very concerned about the pandemic and getting us past it. They're concerned about the runaway federal spending that seems to have no real connection to solving the current crisis, but rather is just the Democratic Party taking advantage of the power that they now have to fulfill a whole series of wish list items that they've had for a long time.
Well, and if you had to, and I had sent you a note, I said, we get, I think there's been 60 some odd executive orders, correct?
I should have looked up the exact number. He has been issuing executive orders at a pace that is unprecedented and reversing many of the policies that that President Trump had in place, and so it is concerning, and of course it's not the way that our country was meant to operate, so that adds concern to what's happening. Obviously executive orders have been increasingly been utilized by presidents of both parties, and so it causes great concern because of course those things don't get to be considered by all.
And I think that's one of the biggest concerns that a lot of us have when it comes to executive orders. I don't fully understand the constitutionality of it. I just from any perspective, not just when the person's in charge, I'm not in favor of, but even when we are in power, I don't really understand. I have not spent time studying the history of why executive orders are allowed and to what extent they are allowed. Can you speak to that a little bit? I didn't really prepare you for that question, but what can you tell us about that? Do you have a little bit of knowledge on that?
Well, so I guess what I would say is that always the president from the beginning had certain power, and as the leader of the executive branch of government, the president is charged with administering the government, the executive branch of government. So in that sense, executive orders are not inappropriate, or they are appropriate, maybe a more positive way of saying it, because there are things that the president needs to do. I think the idea of an executive order as we know it today was created as a means of making that appear more formal, more like a law or an edict that's being issued, and so presidents have increasingly relied on that path to try to give their actions, if you will, the import of law, and in many cases essentially have succeeded in doing that by essentially announcing what their policy is going to be in terms of how they run the government, but doing so through a formally issued executive order that to some degree carries with it the weight of law, and so that's part of it. Part of it is that, frankly, I believe Congress has has abdicated its responsibility, in some cases intentionally handing power to the executive branch or the administrative branch by delegating responsibilities to the executive. In other places, by just not stepping forward and asserting the authority of the legislative branch. And so, and then finally, I would say the courts have been complicit in this by upholding executive orders. Frankly, at times when I think the correct decision would be for the courts to say the executive doesn't have this authority, or this authority that they're asserting goes too far. And an example of that, I would argue, would be the President Obama's issuing of an executive order with respect to those, with respect to children who've been brought here illegally, and the so-called DACA executive order, which unfortunately, the president issued it, even though he said many times he didn't have the authority to issue that executive order. But then the courts essentially upheld it, and when President Trump tried to countermand it with an executive order of his own, the courts blocked him in doing so. And so that's an example of how this has kind of gotten away from us. Certainly, I think the founding fathers would be, turning over in their graves, probably are turning over in their graves, because they did not want a king, and they took great steps to set up a government that would have checks and balances. And unfortunately, those checks and balances don't appear to be working entirely right now. Now that, those things tend to ebb and flow over time. And so my hope is that we could head this thing back in the right direction over time. But it will require the people electing members of Congress that are determined to reclaim the power of the legislative branch, and it will require electing presidents who, like President Trump, appoint judges who are strict constructionists, who are textualists, who believe that the Constitution should be enforced as it was written, and who will appropriately limit the power of the executive branch.
Well, and that's the thing that I remind people, that when it comes to the executive orders and the way that they affect our lives, our defense is in the courts. Unfortunately, as you said, the courts have not been real supportive in many things, especially when it comes to trying to certify the elections properly. So, I mean, that's been, we've heard so much about what President Trump was able to do in seating judges, but we certainly haven't seen it have much effect, unfortunately. And I mean, can you speak to that a little bit? Can we? I don't know. Are we? I feel like we're still seeing a lot of litigation going on in respects to what happened with the election. And we anticipate, I think you said on Saturday, it took, 11 years to sort out the mess, from 100 years. Speak a little bit to that and how long it took us to get really justice in the election. It was in the 1800s, and I forget which one. But you spoke a little bit on that, didn't you, on Saturday?
I did, and so I do think that this again, the system of government that our founders gave us moves sometimes very slowly, and that can be frustrating when you want to see quick change. But I think they believed that it was better to slow things down, and so I think we're better served when our system works like they intended it to, and that makes it take time sometimes. And so with respect to our election and thinking about the 2020 election, we first need to remember that that we have a federalist system when it comes to our elections, and the Constitution specifically delegated to the state legislatures of the many states the authority to determine how federal elections would be conducted, including the election, of course, of the president in the various states. And so, and this is the real, I think, crux of the problem with what happened in 2020. Of course, there are many questions surrounding the 2020 election, and I hope that and believe that over time all of those will ultimately be pursued. But the one that I think really cuts to the core of what happened in 2020 is that in various states around the country, the laws that were put in place to guide the the conduct of the federal and in this case presidential election by the various state legislatures were usurped or countermanded by judges, in some cases by election officials at the state and local level, and so their plan for how the election should be conducted wasn't followed in those various states, and that's really, I think, the single thing that had the greatest impact on the election. So we saw various forms of that, extended registration all the way up until same-day registration of voters in some cases, relaxation of the ID requirements or verification requirements for the identity of those people registering, mail-in balloting, universal mail-in balloting, where ballots were actually mailed to people, and just a whole host of other steps that in many cases were enforced by the courts. We saw that attempted to be done here in Tennessee. So we had a chancellor in Davidson County that ordered that anyone who wanted to absentee vote could. Thankfully, our officials here fought back, and ultimately that decision was overturned in Tennessee. And so we're not immune to this in Tennessee, and just fortunately our officials prevailed and helped us to avoid some of these problems. And so that's the issue that I think led to the problems in the 2020 election. As you asked, and it's taken a while to get there, we've had problems with our elections. It's been true throughout history. I guess you could say that they're institutions that are run by human beings, and we are fallible and up to no good lots of times. And so through history, we've had ongoing problems with elections in this country, and it's taken time to solve those. I was pointing to the 1876 presidential election, and some of the listeners who are students of history will remember that election. It was a close presidential election. There was considerable question about several of the state's electoral votes in that election, and I won't get down into the details, but it was a bit of a mess, and so it wasn't resolved until well into 1877. Almost a constitutional crisis facing the country at that time, and ultimately there was a compromise president, but for the Congress worked on trying to put 1887 when the Electoral Count Act was passed to try to remedy the problems that governed the process that we just went through back on January 6th concerning the counting of the electoral votes in the joint session of Congress. And so I use that as the example to say this is going to take some time. We want to maintain our federalist system of elections in this country, I believe, because we don't want to impose a top-down solution. And U-turn, we can talk a little bit more about H.R. 1 that passed the House last week and how that really exemplifies what we don't want to see happen with our elections. But let me get you to pause for just a second, because we're already almost at 25 after, and I need to pause and just before we get into HR 1, if you don't mind, let me go ahead and pause and do one of my ads. But you're kind of sliding right into where we need to talk about with HR 1, with where we're going right now. So if you don't mind for just a second, let me just take a break here, and we're going to talk for a moment about our friends over at Corbin Creek Greenhouse, Gifts Nursery and Gardening Center. I know that Amy is just giddy right now because she is a summer person. She is a warm weather person. She does not like the cold weather. All you had to do is go and see her sometime this winter, and she's like, I want to put on my shorts. I want the sun shining. I want to get out there and enjoy it. And I know she's just bubbling over as we're getting ready to be able to bring those plants out and start putting things in the ground. You can put some of the cold weather seed in the ground. You can't put those tender plants in the ground. I had frost on my windshield this morning. So we're not done yet. And really all the way up until about April 15th, you got to be really careful about what you plant outside, because it could get nipped with those temperatures, because they just vary so much. But as we get ready to spring forward and have longer days and all that fun stuff that comes along with being able to get out in your yard, go and talk to Amy and she'll get you all fired up. You can get maybe some bedding plants that you can keep indoors until they're ready to go in the ground. I know a lot of people are there. There are some flowers and things like that
that are more hardy in the colder temperatures, and she can talk to you about exactly what those are. Some of the shrubberies and things like that you can start putting in the ground, but you need to get all that from Amy, because I am even though I'm a country girl, I grew up on a farm, I've forgotten everything I was ever taught. So I'm a novice now, and I have to go to the expert, and Amy is an expert when it comes to everything for your garden. They are also expert when it comes to CBD. I cannot say enough about this product. I was skeptical. I thought it was snake oil. But then when my doctor recommended it, and then I found out Amy and Bill grows the plants, they process the oil up in Joelton. This is a local product. It's Robertson County grown CBD, and it's right here. And so that way, if you're interested in this, and my doctor told me to get interested in it, the first thing I was like, well, who do I talk to? Because it seems like everybody's coming at me with all these things that they want to sell me, and it all just kind of feels like a network marketing scheme, and I just didn't really want to hear anything about it. Well, then I went right to the source and was able to get a product that's as pure as it can be right here in Robertson County. It's Robertson County CBD at Corbin Creek Greenhouse, Gifts Nursery and Gardening Center. Miss Jane's CBD, if you know Miss Jane, everybody knows Miss Jane. And the topicals that they make, the salve that they make it right there in their house. So, I mean, this is real stuff. This is exactly what you're wanting to get when it comes to something like CBD and you've got a lot of questions. You want to go where it's sourced. And that way you know what you're getting. Well, you know what you're getting at Corbin Creek, and it has been a game changer for me with my arthritis. I can't say enough about it. If you want to talk to them, go by Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5. Sunday, they're open from 1 to 4 while it's still cold. They'll extend those hours as it warms on up. But Amy says just come by and give her a call. She's got a number posted there that you can call her when you get out there. And if she's not right there, she's up the hill or around doing some work, but she's always around. But they're at 4920 Highway 161, Corbin Creek Greenhouse, Gifts Nursery and Gardening Center. When you get by there, always tell them that U-Turn sent you, and thank them for sponsoring One Street Over. Our guest via phone is Congressman John Rose, and representing us up in the people's house and doing an excellent job of it. About to be a daddy again, got a new baby on the way, just really any day now. And he's gotten called back to Washington on a day he was not supposed to be there. But we appreciate you getting up there and representing us, sir, very much. So,
well, thank you.
And as we were kind of getting ready for the break, we were talking about the implications of the election of 1876 and how it led to what we had whenever it came to certifying the Electoral College. Now, a lot of us would say, well, it obviously didn't work, and so it needs to be examined again. But until we have people in power that have that view, we're kind of stuck just trying to keep up roadblocks to keep very radical policy from becoming the law of the land. And H.R. 1, I would say, is a radical policy. Would you agree?
I do agree, and I think it really points out a cautionary tale for Republicans, conservatives, and those concerned about the 2020 election, because, it would be easy for our knee-jerk reaction to the 2020 election to be that, well, we should impose some sort of national standard, some sort of national system, which is exactly what the Democrats are trying to do. And they actually passed H.R. 1 in the last Congress, in the last House, on the House side. Fortunately, it didn't pass on the Senate side and didn't become law, but they have now passed it again. And it essentially would bring to Tennessee the same dysfunction and bad policy that you saw put in place in several of these other states that led to the problems that we saw with the 2020 election. And so, the Founding Fathers gave us a federalist system of government, and they wanted power to be left at the state level, and the federal election system does that. Obviously, we were unhappy with some of the outcomes in 2020, and we have to work to fix those, and I think we can. But I think the answer is not to try to put a top-down solution in place, because certainly we don't want that system forced upon us in Tennessee. And so H.R. 1 passed, and probably your listeners have heard lots of the provisions that make H.R. 1 so onerous and so, I think, corrosive to our election process. We put in place things like automatic voter registration without proof of identity. It would stop the states from cleaning up the voter rolls, removing those people who've died or who've left the state. You'd have same day voter registration, which of course makes it difficult to be sure that the people that are registering and voting are first of all legal citizens, but second of all that they haven't registered in other jurisdictions and therefore aren't voting. Generally, a whole set of procedures that are part of why it takes so long in some of those states to get to the answer of who won the election. So, for example, we saw in New York, and of course many of us are familiar with the problems with the presidential election, but in the state of New York, we didn't know the winner of New York's 22nd congressional district race until early February. So it took almost 2.5, 3 months to get to the answer of who won an election, as compared to here in Tennessee, where we knew the winner of all of our elections on election night. And I think there's a value in that, obviously, that we all have greater trust in the results when those results can be determined quickly and with little or no fanfare. And so H.R. 1, probably the thing that maybe would disturb the people the most is that it will force taxpayers to pay for campaigns by establishing a 6-to-1 match for small dollar donations to federal candidates. So imagine a candidate runs and they get a $200 contribution from an individual, and then your taxpayer dollars will give that candidate $1,200 in additional federal taxpayer-funded money to run their campaign. So if you don't like political ads, the last thing you want is to know that your money, your taxpayer funds, are paying for those candidates to run attack ads or to spread misinformation or just to clutter up the airwaves with messages that you might not prefer to hear. And so H.R. 1 passed overwhelmingly on a partisan basis. Actually, the opposition, I believe, was bipartisan, and so it would pass in the Senate, I believe, were it not for the filibuster. And so, we all wonder from time to time if the Senate should do away with the filibuster. And I think we're going to get a real illustration here over the next 2 years at least for how the filibuster sometimes comes to our aid in terms of stopping bad policy from becoming law.
What is the chance of them doing away with the filibuster, do you think?
Well, I think it's something that we have to be fearful of. Frankly, right now, we're kind of at the mercy of the Democratic majority in the Senate as to whether or not they decide to do this. It appears at present that a couple of Democratic senators from Arizona and from West Virginia are not in favor of removing the filibuster. It's not clear whether Majority Leader Chuck Schumer from New York, Senator Schumer, whether he would do so, but there obviously is lots of pressure on them to remove it so that they can enact their liberal progressive agenda and do so with a Senate that is tied, where they have a one-vote advantage when the vice president votes to break ties. And so, I know we were all frustrated when we saw the Senate fail to take action over the last several years when Republicans had a majority in the Senate and the House, and that is frustrating. But we see now how the filibuster perhaps is useful in helping to stem the tide, frankly, and it's frustrating when it works against you, but it's I think it's provides some a buffer, if you will, from policy changes happening maybe too swiftly and faster than perhaps would be ideal.
We throw around terms like filibuster, and some people are like, I don't really fully understand what the filibuster does. Can you speak to that? Are you prepared to speak to that a little bit to help people understand the importance of it?
Sure. So essentially, it's really pretty simple. The filibuster simply means that for the Senate to take action, they have to have a supermajority, not just half plus one, but they actually have to have 60 votes. The Senate has 100, currently has 100 members, and so if they cannot muster 60 votes, then any senator can stop something from happening. So the way that it actually is invoked is that they to force a vote on most matters in the Senate, you've got to you can't even really bring the issue forward unless 60 senators agree to have the issue come forward, and then there would be a vote on the issue, and it could, after the filibuster, after the 60 vote requirement is met, then there would be a vote on the actual issue. It might win by a single vote, but unless you can get 60 votes to let the issue move forward, then it doesn't. Now, the interesting thing for those listening who are parliamentarians, and I grew up in the Future Farmers of America, and we kind of pride ourselves in FFA at learning parliamentary procedure. The interesting thing about the filibuster is that the rules of the Senate are put in place by a simple majority. So it only takes 51 votes to change the rules, but in this case, essentially the majority is putting in place a rule that restricts, the majority being half plus one, they are putting a rule in place that requires that in order to do business, they have to have 60 votes agreeing to take up any particular issue. And so that's part of what creates the controversy around the filibuster, is that a majority, a simple majority, can take that rule out if they want to. And so the Democrats right now, with the tying vote, with the tie-breaking vote of the vice president, they could remove the filibuster as a rule in the Senate, and so they're really only bound by precedent, historical precedent. And the filibuster has not always been in place in the Senate. I think it dates back to the early 1900s, but it has now been in place for well over 100 years, and so in recent years it has been carved back from a little in certain instances where the Senate has made exceptions where they don't require the 60 vote threshold in order to move forward. But that's, in a nutshell, that's the simple story.
And that's the fascinating thing is people don't really understand that when it comes to their rules, it does just take the simple majority, because we see things, we think, well, why didn't the filibuster stop that? And so then you have to kind of look into exactly what is being considered. Is it a rules change? There's so many nuances to it that it gets muddy very quickly if you're just kind of a novice and not really fully understanding the importance of the filibuster. And, we do have two senators who said they're not going to vote to remove the filibuster. So if that happens, then we had hoped that if we could have won one senatorial seat in Georgia, that would have been our roadblock. We talked a lot about that. But with the filibuster in and of itself will be our roadblock if it goes well. Would you not agree?
That's right. I think the roadblock right now is the filibuster rule, and so with respect, just this weekend, the Senate passed, I think yesterday, they passed the new coronavirus relief measure that President Biden had proposed, $1.9 trillion of additional spending, and that passed using a procedure in the Senate that's called budget reconciliation. And this was a special procedure that was put in place back in the early 70s in the Senate. And so one time with each budget year, the Senate can pass the budget using this budget reconciliation, and it doesn't require the 60 vote majority to get past the filibuster. And so that's how that was accomplished. And you've heard a lot of reporting in recent days about what could be included in that budget reconciliation process. And so, for example, the Senate parliamentarian ruled that the minimum wage proposal that President Biden had made and that was a part of this legislation could not be included because it was not germane to the budget. It was not strictly a budget matter, and so that limits what could be used, what can be included in a bill that would pass under the budget reconciliation process. And as we know, in recent years, both the Democratic majorities and Republican majorities have removed the filibuster as it relates to the confirmation of federal judges. First, the Democratic Party did this with respect to district court judges, and then later the Republican Party did it with respect to Supreme Court judges. And so that's how, that's why many of President Trump's Supreme Court justice nominations were accomplished without having to achieve that 60-vote threshold.
Okay, and I appreciate you answering those questions because I get those a lot because people just don't really fully understand the way the rules work, and the rules are rather complicated and muddy at times. I tell you, we need to pause for a moment, and I do appreciate that you get this stuff, and we've got a good congressman here, guys, that studies this and is not taking this lightly, his role. I've mentioned to you several times this mantra that I picked up from a pastor up there in your neck of the woods, Bobby Davis, who talks about what's your responsibility. If it's in your ability to affect it or change it, it's your responsibility, but if it's not, you give it to God. And I said, well, that has helped me understand what my role is. I look at Congressman John Rose and I say, well, it is in your ability to do some things I can't do. So we send you there with prayer, brother. I appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you.
And I will talk more in just a second, but I do need to pause for a second and talk about my friends, Barry and Rebecca Richards with the Exit Realty Garden Gate team. They're going to be with me tonight at my table for the Open Door Pregnancy and Resource Center. I don't know why. I just sometimes get the words all twisted in my head, but they're going to be there with me because Barry does a beautiful job of these walkthrough tours. You can have people walking through your home without having to walk through your home. So they did that for Open Door Pregnancy and Resource Center, the new building, and I just can't wait for that to be unveiled because if you don't know what's going on over there, oh my goodness, you're going to find out very soon. And it's very cool that because of his marketing background, he can present that to you virtually. Well, he can do that with your home. He and Rebecca are the whole package. Rebecca's been at the realty game longer than him, but he's always been a part of it because they're married. And so he's always been there to help her with anything that she had going on in regards to her business end of the realty. And she's one of the first in the area to be a seniors real estate specialist. He came out of a marketing background, so he's got all the marketing know-how to make sure you get the most eyes on your property. And as a couple, they really want to work to make sure that everything you need is what you're getting when it comes to buying or selling. And when they were in here the last time, they said the most important thing, because of the time in which we're living right now, that it's a seller's market. That means that if you're selling, you got to make sure you price everything properly so whoever's buying can finance that, because it's got to appraise properly and be something that they can finance. And if you're a buyer, then properties are selling so fast, you've got to get pre-qualified before you get out there and get looking, or you'll get your heart broken. And that is just as simple as it goes. They specialize in Robertson County, but they also buy and sell in the surrounding counties across the state line in Kentucky, because we're right here on top of it. But if you want to find out more from them, go to BuyRobertsonCounty.com. See their listings, BuyRobertsonCounty.com. And if you want to connect with them, you can go to sellwithbecky.com, sellwithbecky.com. And if you happen to be at the dinner tonight, you can come over to the table and say, hey, because I know myself and Ray Render will be there. I've got the Southergill sitting over at my table. We're going to have a good time tonight, and we appreciate all of y'all that can come. And when you get by there, be sure and tell Barry and Rebecca that U-Turn sent you if you have anything that you need. Now, back to our conversation with Congressman John Rose. He is on the phone with us this morning here on 1100 WSGI. And we have been talking about, I had to kind of stop the conversation so I could do my ad, and we were talking about just kind of the rules of the Senate and how that is our roadblock to some of the very, very radical ideas that are coming out of the House of Representatives right now. And it has to be rough, John, sitting there and listening to this and just, voting, but knowing you can't really stop it. I mean, how are you handling everything right now in Washington? Just prayer, right?
Well, it is. That's right, and I certainly appreciate the prayers. Lots of people reach out to me and share with me that they're praying for me and our family, and I appreciate that so much. It is frustrating knowing that you go to work every day, and no matter what you do, as if the other side sticks together, then you're unable to stop many of these radical proposals that are coming through. And just like last week, of course, some people say, well, is there any hope? And I would say there are glimmers of hope. So, for example, last week, with respect to H.R. 1, some Democratic House members actually introduced an amendment to H.R. 1 that would have made it legal for convicted felons still serving their sentences to vote in our elections. And thankfully, we were joined by enough Democrats to defeat that. So now the H.R. 1 does make it legal for convicted felons who've completed serving their sentences. They would be now allowed to vote nationwide. And so, again, the main theme of H.R. 1 is that it just it essentially nationalizes our elections. And I believe, actually, it is unconstitutional, or many of the provisions of H.R. 1 are unconstitutional, but it would take time. If it was to become law, obviously would have to proceed through the courts, and hopefully the courts would rein that in by finding many of the provisions of H.R. 1 unconstitutional, because, again, the Constitution clearly sets out that it is the province of the state legislatures to set up the rules surrounding our elections. And so I guess just to close on the election issue, we have work to do in this country, and that's going to mean, obviously safeguarding our election process in Tennessee and making sure that it works appropriately, but also helping to advocate nationally for policies in other states and putting in place groups and organizations to watch elections in other states to make sure that what we saw happen last November doesn't happen again.
And that's the bottom line. As I look at the outline of what H.R. 1 is proposing, it's just I think anybody that's looking at it honestly says it's just trying to make it easier to cheat. And it just is, when other countries look at things like that, and they just shake their head, because we're America. We're supposed to, I know I have a lot of friends that are immigrants, and I had so many friends that became citizens, and this was their first election to vote in. And they called me so distressed because they were so upset, because this was not supposed to happen in America. And they just did not understand how we could have gotten let loose of this so much. And so I'm so thankful that there are some across the aisle that are joining with you. I'm thankful for the filibuster, and I'm praying that it holds for at least a couple of years, so maybe we can, take the reins of power again, just for some reason. Because and the views and opinions expressed are our own, and don't necessarily express the views and ownership of this radio station. But we are conservatives, I think, even before we're Republicans, and followers of Jesus Christ, man. And we want God's will done in this country. And I'm speaking for myself right now, not John. I'll let him speak for himself. But I just can't say enough that we are just praying for you, brother, and just stay strong. And I believe we're going to do fine on the other side of this, but it's going to be a battle to get there.
I share your view. And I think, we know that if the other side continues to overreach in terms of the policies they put in place, then it will, I believe, galvanize opposition and galvanize support for the conservative free market principles that we value and treasure as conservatives. And so, we have a long history of this in this country. We move one direction for a while, we move back the other direction, and we have to remember that President Biden, tried to run on the platform that he was going to be a moderate and try to govern from the middle, and he disavowed that he would implement some of these policies that he's turned right around and put in place. Let's not forget that he claimed that he was not against fracking and not against domestic energy production, but then one of his very first executive orders was to shut down the Keystone XL pipeline, which is critical to transporting efficiently and in an environmentally sensitive and safe way American and North American produced energy to help make us energy independent. And so his actions speak far louder than his words, and And so the American people can judge that and see that the policies that he's putting in place are not going to be helpful to them. And I didn't say this on Saturday, Laverne, when I was there at Robertson County, but I've been doing this when I visit local meetings, and I ask people, if you've ever worked by the hour, raise your hand. If you've ever worked for an hourly wage, raise your hand. And almost everyone in Tennessee raises their hand when you ask that question, and I think it's a testament to who we are as a people in this state. We come from humble and common beginnings, most of us, and almost all of us have at one point or another worked by the hour. Well, if you are somebody who's done that, then, the Biden administration and his policies are not friendly to you. And President Trump proved that if you enforce the laws of this country and you enforce our border laws and our immigration laws, then it will stem the tide of illegal immigration. And that led to, for the first time in more than a generation, an increase in wages for hourly workers. And so the policies make clear who is looking out for the average person in America, and it's the Republican Party. And I feel strongly that is true.
Amen. Amen. And I tell you, I've got to take one more break, so we're going to pause again. And when we come back, we haven't really spoken about the fortress that you're having to work in with the barricades and the military zone that is around the Capitol. So I want you to kind of speak to that again. We addressed it last month and how you've been putting out you put out a bill to oppose that. I believe. I mean, you can clarify that for us, but that's where I want to go when I come back from talking about my friends over at Reiselman Buick GMC, one of the largest GMC Buick inventories in Tennessee. Can't say enough about how that Todd and Courtney Reiselman, when they wanted to become owners of a dealership, and they searched the country to find a dealership that they wanted to be a part of. And so they picked us. And I just think that just says something. They picked us. They picked Robertson County to come and build their business. And they're just a great couple, so personable, and would love to sit down and talk to you about what they're doing at Reiselman Buick GMC. I'm a big GMC fan. I drive Yukons. I love them, love them, love them. I'm a pretty big fan of that Sierra pickup truck, though, with the tailgate that does like 6 different things. It's the Swiss Army knife of tailgates. I love watching the commercials for that thing. I'm like, I want that so bad. They're so cool. And Todd says that if you're somebody that wants something new, right out of the factory, he said, why don't you come in and let's just order exactly what you want? Because things are kind of wonky right now with the plants and delivery and all of that on new inventory. He says, so if you've got something real specific you want, let's get you what you want. Come in and just order it. And that way, when it gets there, it's yours. Now, if you're a pre-owned person like I am, they have got certified pre-owned that goes through multi-point inspections. They have got vehicles coming in all the time. They're sending me trade-ins where people will, there's somebody that buys new and they'll drive it for a year, 2 years. They'll trade it back in and it's low miles. A lot of the times it has factory warranty left on it, all the bells and whistles. That's what I like to do. I like to buy pre-owned luxury vehicles. I'm driving a Denali right now. I love all the extras. And that's how I like to buy the certified, or when it comes to certified pre-owned or pre-owned, I love getting all the fancy stuff. And you can do that very, very reasonably. Maybe you can't afford that right off the truck. Maybe you can't afford that when it comes right from the factory. Well, you can after it's been driven a little bit, a few years old. Go in and talk to them about that. They got great financing options, great leasing options if you're doing new. You can even fill out your application online at ReiselmanBuickGMC.com. Everything from GMC and Buick, everything that you want in your driveway right now. And it's going to be so much fun during the summertime. Wouldn't you love to have a new vehicle, a new ride to just take you on into the summer? They're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. until 7:30 p.m. Saturday, they're open 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. They even have service hours every single day. They're open. The service department's open until noon on Saturday. Great folks over at Reiselman Buick GMC and sponsors here at One Street Over. When you see them, always thank them for sponsoring our little show and tell them U-Turn sent you when you get out there to buy your new ride. Not in studio, but via phone, and his deputy director is in studio with me hanging out. Ray Renders here, and John Rose got called back to Washington by Miss Pelosi because, she's in charge, right?
That's right.
So talk to us about what's going on with the military zone and the barricades. What can we anticipate things getting back to normal like we're accustomed to in Washington? Do you see that coming?
Well, I hope they do. I think it's unclear yet what's going to happen. So, obviously the events of January 6th were, unwelcome, horrible situation, and those folks who breached the Capitol should have known better, and so, to some degree, it's understandable that there was, heightened concern about the security of the Capitol and the people who work in the Capitol and the Capitol complex. But I believe, as so often is the case, the Democrats have overreacted here. And so if you come to Washington right now, what you would see is a high fence with serpentine razor wire around the entire perimeter of Capitol Hill, and 5,000 National Guardsmen guarding the Capitol. And I certainly advocate for and believe that we should get back to something closer to normal. And for those who've traveled to Washington in the past, you know that the Capitol complex was largely an open campus where you could walk around and then walk right up to the Capitol steps. And so there probably has to be some changes to the use of force policies that the Capitol police officers have, and certainly the events of January 6th exposed that perhaps there was not as good of communication as there should have been around planning for that day and the protests and the rally that was happening, and so some changes that have to be made, but certainly not making the Capitol an armed compound. And so I and many on the Republican side have been advocating for taking the fences down and reopening the Capitol complex and making it easier for people to have contact with their elected representatives. And again, Laverne, you and I have talked about this. It is the people's house, and I serve at the pleasure of the people of the 6th District of Tennessee. And frankly, if I need to be guarded at the level that they're guarding me and other members of Congress presently, there's probably bigger problems that's an indication of. So I think that we should, there should be some modest changes made, and I think that most of those changes could be to, in my view, procedures that the Capitol police officers follow in terms of protecting the Capitol and having better communication and a better command structure for the Capitol police officers so that they are able to respond more quickly in the future. As we know, I think news reports have made clear that they were asking for help prior to January 6th, but the Speaker was holding that back and was not giving them the help that they were asking for. And so I certainly hope that we can get back to a more normal stance with respect to the security at the Capitol, and I hope that it doesn't result in a fence going up around the Capitol complex.
Yeah, permanently, and that's the thing that we just want to we want our Capitol back, and I appreciate so much you being a voice to that. Now we're just in the last couple of minutes here. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to share with the folks of the 6th District?
Well, I know that in these times it's easy to become discouraged and to want to give up on the political process and the process of democratically selecting our representatives in our country, and that's probably true no matter which side of the political spectrum you lean toward. But we are so blessed in this country to be able to choose our leaders and to be able to express our opinions freely, and we need to work hard to protect those freedoms and that process that we have, and this is no time for folks to throw in the towel. Again, it's frustrating when things don't go every day like you want them to, but this is a long game, not a short game, and so you have to stay committed to protecting your freedoms and liberties. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to play a role in that in the House of Representatives. And I just pledge to you that I'll continue to work hard and diligently every day to make sure that the voices of the voters of the 6th District of Tennessee are heard. And if you haven't reached out to me and you want to, I certainly hope you will. We have a great staff in Tennessee, including Ray Render, our Deputy District Director, who's there with you today, Laverne. and he's out and about the district. And certainly you can reach our office via the internet or email or via telephone or by just dropping by one of our offices. We have an office in Gallatin, one in Cookeville here in the district, and of course our office in Washington, which you can't visit right now unless you have a make special arrangements. So I just would encourage people to stay hopeful and involved and educated and informed, and make sure that you come out and you exercise your right to have a role in how our government operates.
Thank you, John, very much. And again, blessings to you guys as you anticipate this new, what's the baby's name? You've got, because we've got a boy.
We're going to name him Samuel.
Samuel. I like that. I like that a lot, very much. And we're praying for you guys, and just keep us posted and let us know how everything's going. And Ray will stand in for you tonight at the dinner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good luck with the dinner tonight. Thanks you, U-Turn, and thank you to WSGI for making this program possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. And we'll look forward to talking to you again. Well, we're going to visit with you after that baby gets born. I want to get you back on at least to say congratulations. You think we can work that out?
Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good,
yes,
John.
Absolutely. And thanks to your sponsors as well.
All right. Thank you, John. And Congressman John Rose has been our guest via phone here on 1100 WSGI. And if you were joining us at the very first, you saw Hannah Sadler come running in at the last minute, because I always kind of have somebody on standby, because sometimes we can only get John for a half hour. And I didn't get a chance to communicate with Hannah prior to this morning. And so we've got her rescheduled, not for this coming Thursday, but next Thursday at 7. And I just want to remind you that Grain and Honey Bake Shop, they are a rock star. They're right there by the post office in that little strip mall, but they're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. They're open Saturday from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. And she is the president of the Farmers Market. So she's going to be talking to us about Farmers Market. But get by there. If you have not tried her sourdough cinnamon rolls, oh my word, they are fabulous. Everything they make is just fabulous. But go by and see them at Grain and Honey. Thank you so much, Hannah, for coming in here, taking her from her work. But she's going to come back in here next Thursday, and we'll look forward to visiting with her. She's always just a really fun guest with us right here on One Street Over. Thank you for being a part of the show as well. This is 1100 WSGI. Have a fabulous day, and please, please, please be a part of Open Door Pregnancy and Resource Center's mission. If you can't be at the dinner tonight, consider becoming a contributor and being a part of what they are doing. They are fabulous. God bless you. Have a great day.